Today we have an epic battle. The Oppressor Mk2 versus the Oppressor Mk1. With the recent price hikes that Rockstar implemented in GTA Online, we're here to find out which one truly reigns supreme in 2023. So if you're ready to see these two go head to head, you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for all the latest GTA Online news, updates, and gameplay tips. Let's get started. Now, this has been an age-old question in GTA Online. Is the Oppressor Mk1 better or is the Oppressor Mk2 better? Well, up until today, it's usually just been the Oppressor Mk2. It was an all-around better vehicle, or it was a more useful vehicle in the game. But now, let's take a look at what Rockstar's done. The Oppressor Mk2 went from being about $3.5-ish million to $8 million. This is crazy. $8 million for this bike. Now, luckily, you can see there is a trade price. It is only, wow, $6 million. Thanks, Rockstar. You're saving us a lot of money here. And you can read at the top left how to actually get the trade price. So for this Oppressor Mk2, to get that trade price, all you need to do is complete 5 client jobs as a VIP, CEO, or MC. So not too bad. So if you are eventually going to purchase this, definitely do that to save $2 million. Whereas the Oppressor Mk1, they actually lowered the price. So they increased the Oppressor Mk2 and lowered the Oppressor Mk1. You can see now the buy it now is 2.7 mil, where the trade price is only about 2 million. And to unlock the trade price for the Oppressor Mk1, you can see at the top left, all you have to do is complete the Work Dispute Mobile Operation mission, which should be very easy to do. So these price changes is the reason I wanted to revisit this topic, because now for people who don't have either of these two vehicles, it's a pretty big decision. Do you get the Oppressor Mk2 and just probably go bankrupt in the game? Or do you just keep it simple with the Oppressor Mk1 and save a lot of money? So hopefully by the end of this video, you'll have a much better idea of how you want to spend your money and which vehicle you want to purchase. So let's hop right in. The first thing I wanted to bring up is the availability. And sort of what I mean by that is just how often you can call these things in the game. How often can you use them? The Oppressor Mk2 has a pretty hefty time limit when you call it in. You can only call it in through the interaction menu once every 5 minutes. So you can see I called it in, spawned instantly next to me, which is great. But then I returned it and then tried to call it back, and I have to wait 5 whole minutes. That is pretty annoying, especially if you call in your Oppressor Mk2 and let's say a griefer like a minute later blows you up. You're going to have to wait 4 minutes from that time to get a new one. It is very annoying, especially if you're going to be participating in sort of PvP activities, because eventually you're going to blow up and then you're just going to be stuck with no vehicle. Whereas the Oppressor Mk1, on the other hand, has no limits. If you have a motorcycle club, you can call this thing instantly every 3 seconds. It's actually pretty awesome, and it's one of the best features about owning an MC club. So that is probably one of the biggest differences when it comes to these two vehicles. The Oppressor Mk1, you're always going to have access to it, where the Oppressor Mk2, in some cases, you're going to have to wait, which is just annoying. The second thing when it comes to comparing these two vehicles is they both need separate vehicles to customize. You can see with the Oppressor Mk2, we're going to go to the LSC. It tells us you can't customize it there because you actually need the terabyte to customize it. And also with the terabyte, I believe you need a nightclub to store the terabyte. So that's 2 additional things you have to purchase when it comes to customizing the Oppressor Mk2. If you want missiles, if you want any of the other good stuff, you're going to need a nightclub, you're going to need a terabyte, which I believe is going to add about $4 to $5 million extra dollars on top of the $8 or $6 million you already spent on the vehicle. Now, unfortunately, the Oppressor Mk1 is kind of the same thing. You also cannot customize this at LSC, and you also need a separate vehicle to customize it in. So this one you can choose. You have 2 options. You have an MOC, or you can actually go with the Avenger. Here's the MOC. You can see nice bright white interior. The Avenger, I think you can maybe customize this to make it a little bit brighter, but you can't really see what the hell you're doing. So I would maybe just stick with the MOC if you want to just stick to one. But you also are going to need to buy that. And I believe to get an MOC, you need the bunker. So that is another property you're going to have to buy, which is again going to add, a couple mil to the price. But with the Oppressor Mk1, if you are only spending 2 million on it, that's not terrible. Now there is one extra cost, or one extra time consuming cost with the Oppressor Mk1. If you do want certain liveries, if you want the rockets, you can only get these by doing the research in the gun running bunker, which is going to take time because you can't pick and choose. I think it is just RNG which ones it researches. So that is a minor annoyance with the Oppressor Mk1. Now, I'll just quickly mention it. When it comes to customization for both of these vehicles, I think they're pretty much the same. Of course, the Oppressor Mk1 has a slightly more customization because it's a bike, so you can customize wheels, some of the aspects on the actual bike itself, where the Oppressor Mk2, it's kind of just like there. You can't do a whole bunch to it. You can change the color. There's some okay liveries, nothing special though. But I would say the customization on both of these vehicles is just average. Now, another interesting point about these two vehicles when comparing them, the Oppressor Mk2 here, now we're spawning it in free roam. We're going to go ahead and start up a job. I'm just going to pick a random mission. And you'll actually see, I'll just skip to when I load in, the Oppressor Mk2 is not there when I load into this mission. This was something that was super triggering to me when I was playing through, I think it was the last dose missions. You cannot use the Oppressor Mk2 in missions anymore. For whatever reason, Rockstar took this feature out. So I know that was a pretty useful vehicle to use in a lot of missions because it just made them very easy. You can't do that anymore. So you're going to be spending $6 to $8 million on a vehicle you can't use in missions. The Oppressor Mk1, on the other hand, works. We're going to do the same thing. I'm going to call it in free roam. We're going to just go ahead and start up a mission. And when I do get into the mission, I have my Oppressor Mk1 and it'll work fine. So if you're doing missions a lot, the Oppressor Mk1 is definitely the better choice. Now, the next thing I wanted to compare was the speed, and this isn't like that important because they are just inherently different vehicles, but in case anyone was wondering, on the left, of course, the Oppressor Mk1, on the right, the Mk2, the Oppressor Mk1 is way faster. The Oppressor Mk1 actually can get up to about 150 miles an hour because the boost constantly regenerates, whereas the Oppressor Mk1, I believe the max speed is only about 130 miles an hour. So, of course, the Oppressor Mk1 is going to be much faster. But again, they're two different vehicles. One is a bike that can glide. The other one is a bike that can fly. So I just thought I'd put it in here, but this test I didn't think was too important. Again, though, as for top speed, though, here's the Oppressor Mk1. You can see now you have to be on the ground to get the 150-ish top speed. Of course, when you're gliding, when you're flying around, it isn't going to be as fast, which maybe defeats the purpose of like a flying bike because you're going to be mainly on the road if you are wanting to go as fast as you can possibly go on it. Whereas the Oppressor Mk2, there is a little trick. So when you are on the ground, it goes 130 miles an hour. But when you start flying, the vehicle only goes about 108 miles an hour. However, if you hold, I think it's the R1, basically the handbrake. If you hold the handbrake, the vehicle will then go 130 miles an hour when in flight mode, but it will constantly pull you towards the ground. So you're going to have to balance that by just, pulling up occasionally. But yeah, 130 is the highest you can go on the Oppressor Mk2. Now, I think the biggest thing people want to know is the rocket comparison. So you're buying these vehicles, you probably want to know how their rockets compare to each other. I'm going to be honest, I think they're roughly the same. So we'll start with the Oppressor Mk2. This one has 20 rockets. So you can see, we'll just spam here. I'll speed this up so you don't waste your time. You have 20 rockets to shoot before you run out. Whereas with the Oppressor Mk1, it's actually the same thing. You also have 20 rockets on the Oppressor Mk1. So as far as the capacity, they are both the exact same. Now, when it comes to actually using the rockets, I couldn't think of a sort of definitive test, so I just got the cops on me and I was shooting the cops. But you'll get an idea, hopefully, from these clips as to how the rockets behave. And of course, we're going to start with the Oppressor Mk1. These rockets, they're good. They're not the best in the game. When you lock on, doesn't always mean you're going to hit the target. It depends on the speed you're going, the speed the other people or the NPCs are coming at you. Like the helicopters, for instance, there was a handful of times, you'll probably see it here, I just don't hit the helicopters. Mainly because they're flying at me and I'm flying at them, so just the physics of it doesn't make sense. doesn't work. So that is something you should know. You shouldn't expect the rockets on the Oppressor Mk2 to always hit. The same also happens with cars sometimes. Like if people are driving towards you in a fast vehicle, the rocket's gonna hit like right behind them. So while they are good for like stationary targets, it's especially good for missions when you're trying to just take people out. In a more PvP scenario, it's not really that great. And then we'll move on to the Oppressor Mk1. And honestly, I had the same sort of things happen. They're good. The rockets do hit some of the vehicles, but when it comes to certain helicopters and certain vehicles flying towards me, it did make it slightly harder to hit. Sometimes the rockets didn't hit at all. Also, you are flying a bike that glides as opposed to an actual flying bike. So you have less control of where you're aiming. You also have less control of like where you're actually seeing things. The Oppressor Mk1 is just hands down better in the air. So this Oppressor Mk1 here is probably not the best vehicle you're going to want to use for PvP stuff and even sort of NPC PvE stuff. It'll get the job done, but it's not going to be like super easy. So honestly, I would just say the rockets on both of these vehicles are about the same. They're not the best in the game, but they are just good. And we're going to actually stay with the Oppressor Mk1 here because there's a couple of negatives to this vehicle. Number one, you can easily die on this thing because either you can't control it, you hit a wall like I do here, and then you just fall to your death. Or again, because you can't really see where you're going, you accidentally run into a helicopter and then you get killed in their blades. But it's not as easy to fly around, and you can sort of kill yourself in some interesting ways, let's say, on the Oppressor Mk1. So I definitely think that's a negative to it. It also doesn't have countermeasures, and that's a big thing, especially if you're playing in public lobbies. If someone locks onto you, good luck. There is no chafe, there is no flares that you can pop. That is probably one of the biggest negatives to this particular vehicle. Whereas on the Oppressor Mk2, you can see here, I have the chafe or chaff, whatever it's called, on the Oppressor Mk2, and it allows me to not get locked onto when I pop those. So it is a lot better for free roam. If there's any griefers, I can easily escape them, or I can fire back without them locking on. Now, there is a little weird part about these countermeasures on the Oppressor Mk2. They only actually work when you're in the air. So if you are just on the ground and someone locks onto you, you might get killed because you can't use the countermeasures when you're on the ground. It's really weird, but I figured I would mention that because that is sort of a negative to this vehicle. Another huge difference, and I've mentioned it a couple of times now, but the Oppressor Mk2, it can fly, which means you can go way higher than the Oppressor Mk1. So if that's something you're into, then yeah, the Oppressor Mk2 is definitely good for that. But I will just say, and this is a big but, are you going to want to spend an extra $4 to $6 million on basically a helicopter? Like, you can just get a helicopter and do these same things. You just go up in the air. But if you did want it all in one vehicle, then yeah, okay, the Oppressor Mk2 can fly to great heights. And then the final thing I wanted to mention is some unique stuff you can do with these vehicles. The Oppressor Mk2, and I will just mention, this is very difficult to do. It can fly upside down. So you can see in this clip, this guy is flying upside down. And honestly, it makes it a pretty terrifying vehicle. I believe you go actually way faster flying upside down. So you're a lot harder to hit. I believe you can outrun missiles when you're flying upside down. It's pretty crazy, but there is some skill that is needed to do this. This isn't something you can just buy and then get done. This is going to take some time to acquire this skill. So if you were into that and you want to sort of have that progress, then sure, go with the Oppressor Mk2 and eventually learn how to fly upside down. If not, then yeah, it's a wasted sort of ability. Although you can do somewhat of a similar thing on the Oppressor Mk1. Obviously not as great because you have to eventually touch the ground. But like you can see in this clip, this guy does some pretty cool stuff with the Oppressor Mk1. So if you like stunting around, if you like trying to challenge yourself with certain things, the Oppressor Mk1 is also a great vehicle for that because you can do similar stuff while flying upside down. So with all of that being said, which one is better? I personally think it's kind of a no-brainer now. I just am not spending $6 million, $8 million, maybe even more if you need to buy the Terabyte nightclub on one vehicle. in the game that now I can't use for missions. If it does get blown up, I gotta wait 5 minutes to call it again. Like, it doesn't seem that practical. If you have billions of dollars, of course, why are you watching this video? Buy it, buy everything. But with this new price that Rockstar's added to the Oppressor Mk2, it is just not good anymore. I think the Mk1 is actually more fun as well. The Oppressor Mk2 is pretty basic. It's pretty boring. I mean, it's great. It is very useful, but it's the same thing over and over again. You just fly, shoot things, fly away. The Oppressor Mk1 at least has some skill. It's different every time because you have to go up and down. It is fun to fly. It is fun to sort of try and see how far you can go without touching the ground. So it does provide some different aspects to the game, but I do just think that the Oppressor Mk1 now is much, much better. The biggest negative, like I mentioned, was the no countermeasures. So as long as you're, not being crazy in public lobbies with other griefers, I think you're going to enjoy the Oppressor Mk1 a lot more. But let us know in the comments what you guys think. Is the Oppressor Mk2 worth $8 million? Does anyone think it is? I'm actually curious to hear anyone's thoughts if they believe that. That's going to do it for the video. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this helped you guys decide which one is better, which one you want, if you want either of them at all. Please drop the video a like if you did enjoy. Subscribe for more GTA content. Hit that bell button to be notified when I do upload more GTA content. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.